am Amelia, 35, and today I buried my husband, James, overseas. After 30 sleepless hours of traveling home, I texted our family group chat. Flight lands at 5 p.m. Can someone pick me up? My brother Troy replied, "We are busy. Try Uber." Mom added, "Why didn't you plan better?" With trembling fingers, I typed, "No worries," while silently collapsing inside. I had no idea that within hours, my family would be watching my tragedy unfold on the evening news. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever felt abandoned when you needed someone most. Before grief rewrote my entire existence, I had what most would call a picture-perfect life. James and I met during our sophomore year of college. He spilled coffee on my economics textbook, insisted on buying me a new one, and somehow managed to turn that disaster into a dinner date. We married after graduation and built a beautiful life together in Portland. I worked as a marketing director while James thrived as a software engineer. We had a cozy 2-story house with a garden I poured my heart into each spring. James always joked that my tomatoes could win state fair ribbons if I ever entered them. 10 years of marriage passed like a beautiful dream. We traveled whenever possible, had game nights with friends on Thursdays, and saved diligently for our future. James and I talked about starting a family soon. We had even converted the spare bedroom into a home office that could easily become a nursery when the time came. Everything changed last fall when James was offered a 6-month contract with an international tech company in Singapore. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, one that would advance his career tremendously and allow us to experience living abroad together. I arranged to work remotely for 3 months, planning to split our time between continents. We were so excited about the adventure ahead. The night before his departure, we had a special dinner at home. I still remember every detail: the soft music playing in the background, the flickering candles on our dining table, and the way James looked at me when he promised this opportunity would make our future even brighter. 6 months will fly by, he assured me, his fingers intertwined with mine, and then we'll start the next chapter. We video called every day for the first 2 months. I flew out to visit him for 3 weeks around the holidays, and it felt like a second honeymoon. Singapore was beautiful, vibrant, and exciting. James showed me around the city, introduced me to his coworkers, and we explored neighboring islands on weekends. Everything seemed perfect. We even started seriously discussing trying for a baby when his contract ended. Then came the call that shattered my world. I was back in Portland when James complained about a severe headache during our morning video chat. "Probably just stress," he said, massaging his temples. "Big project deadline coming up." 8 hours later, his coworker called from James's phone. My husband had collapsed during a meeting and been rushed to the hospital. I booked the first available flight, but by the time I arrived 26 hours later, James was already in a coma. "Brain aneurysm," the doctors explained. They performed emergency surgery, but the damage was catastrophic. For 5 days, I sat by his hospital bed, holding his hand, talking to him, praying for a miracle that never came. James never regained consciousness. He was only 37 years old. The nightmare of dealing with a foreign hospital system alone was overwhelming. Every form was confusing. Every conversation was stilted through translation apps or harried hospital interpreters. I called my family back home daily, desperate for emotional support. But our conversations were brief. "We are praying for you," they would say, before explaining why they needed to rush off the phone. My mother asked if I had thought to purchase travel insurance. My brother Troy suggested I hire a local service to handle things so I could come home sooner. But I couldn't leave James. Not like that. Not in a country where he knew no one but his coworkers. I stayed and handled everything myself. The paperwork for his death certificate took 3 full days and countless office visits. Arranging for a burial in Singapore, because the cost of transporting his body home was prohibitively expensive, required navigating unfamiliar customs and traditions. The funeral was small: some of his coworkers, a few expats he had befriended, and me. No family, no lifelong friends. My parents said the flight was too expensive on short notice. My brother had critical work obligations. I stood alone as they lowered my husband into the ground, a world away from everyone we loved. The financial strain was crushing. Our insurance covered some expenses, but international policies had limitations I never thought to examine before tragedy struck. I drained our savings and maxed out credit cards to pay for everything. Through it all, I kept updating my family, hoping someone would offer more than just brief condolences or practical suggestions. Looking back, I shouldn't have been surprised by their response to my airport text. My family had always operated this way. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, my parents attended, but left immediately after my speech to get my brother to his baseball game. At my college graduation, they arrived late and left early. Even at my wedding, my mother spent more time fussing over Troy, bringing the wrong girlfriend, than celebrating my marriage. I had spent my entire life accommodating their priorities, making excuses for their behavior, and telling myself that family just had different ways of showing love. Now, standing at my husband's grave on the other side of the world, I finally understood that some people simply do not have the capacity to put others first, even in moments of desperate need. After the funeral, a whole new nightmare began. The Singaporean bureaucracy required multiple certified copies of death certificates, each needing to be authenticated at different government offices spread across the city. I spent 3 days shuttling between buildings in the tropical heat, standing in endless lines and trying to explain my situation through grief-choked words. Each night, I collapsed in our rented apartment, surrounded by James's clothes that still smelled like him. On my final morning in Singapore, I visited James's grave one last time. The cemetery was peaceful at dawn, birds singing in the lush trees overhead. I placed fresh flowers beside his simple headstone and sat on the dewy grass, telling him everything I was bringing home: his favorite books, the watch I had given him for our 5th anniversary, the collection of seashells we had gathered during our weekend trips to nearby beaches. "I will keep you alive in my heart," I whispered, pressing my palm against the cool marble, "every day for the rest of my life." My journey home stretched over 30 hours. First, a 6-hour delay in Singapore due to mechanical issues, then a missed connection in Tokyo requiring an overnight stay in an airport hotel. The final leg included turbulence so severe the flight attendants remained seated for 2 hours. By the time we began our descent into Portland, I had been traveling for more than a day straight, had barely eaten, and was running purely on grief and determination. During those endless travel hours, my mind kept returning to childhood memories, seeing patterns I had previously excused. When I was 8, I broke my arm falling from the backyard treehouse. My parents took me to the emergency room, but left me with a neighbor to wait while they took Troy to his championship soccer game. "He cannot miss this," my mother explained. "The whole team is counting on him." When I earned a scholarship to my dream college, my father's first question was whether it would cost them anything. "Troy had expensive sports camps that summer," he reminded me. "College was my choice, so I should handle the finances." I worked 2 jobs between classes while Troy attended an out-of-state university fully funded by our parents. At 28, my wedding day featured my mother criticizing my dress as impractical, and my father complaining about the cost of the modest venue. Troy showed up an hour late to the ceremony. James had noticed their behavior, but gently encouraged me to focus on our happiness instead. "We cannot change them," he said, "but we can choose how much power they have over our joy." Throughout the funeral arrangements in Singapore, I had called home almost daily. Most calls went to voicemail. When someone did answer, conversations were brief and focused on when I would return rather than how I was coping. My mother suggested I was dwelling on my grief by staying for the funeral rather than simply having James cremated immediately. Troy asked if James had life insurance before expressing concern about a work presentation he was struggling with. Despite this history, some irrational part of me believed that this tragedy, the absolute worst moment of my life, would finally elicit the compassion I had always craved from my family. Surely they would recognize the magnitude of my loss and respond with the support I desperately needed. 3 days before my final flight home, I messaged our family group chat with my itinerary details. The responses were minimal. Thumbs up emojis from both parents, and Troy asking if I was bringing any souvenirs. I clarified my arrival time twice more before boarding my final flight, hoping someone would offer to meet me at the airport. No one did. But I made one last attempt as we touched down on American soil. My brother's "we are busy, try Uber" felt like a physical blow. My mother's "why didn't you plan better" made me question whether I had ever truly mattered to them at all. In that moment, sitting in a cramped airplane seat, surrounded by passengers eager to disembark, I made a silent promise to James and myself. This would be the last time I expected water from an empty well. Portland International Airport buzzed with afternoon activity as I made my way through customs. The fluorescent lighting hurt my eyes after so many sleepless nights, and every announcement over the PA system made me flinch. I navigated the crowded terminal on autopilot, my body present while my mind remained thousands of miles away with James. I stood at the baggage claim, watching suitcases circle endlessly on the conveyor belt. Mine were easy to identify. One large black suitcase containing my clothes, and two others packed with James's possessions, the things I could not bear to leave behind. His favorite sweater, the leather journal I had given him last Christmas, photo albums, the coffee mug he used every morning, fragments of our life together that now represented everything I had left of him. My phone buzzed with another message in the family chat. I opened it, hoping someone had reconsidered. Troy. Seriously, sis, we cannot rearrange our schedules last minute. This is why planning exists. Mom. My father and I have dinner with the Hendersons tonight. We RSVP'd weeks ago. Dad. The forecast says rain later. Drive carefully when you get home. I stared at the screen, a familiar hollow feeling spreading through my chest. Not even a question about how I was doing or if I had arrived safely. No acknowledgement of what I had just been through. I typed a simple, "No worries, I understand." And though I did not understand at all, how could dinner plans or social obligations outweigh the need to support your daughter who just buried her husband alone? The weight of the suitcases made me stagger as I loaded them onto a cart. James's possessions suddenly felt impossibly heavy, both physically and emotionally. As I struggled toward the exit, one of the wheels on the cart stuck, sending the top suitcase crashing to the ground. It burst open, spilling James's clothes across the polished airport floor. I dropped to my knees, frantically gathering his belongings as tears blurred my vision. A blue sweater, his favorite running shoes, the tie he wore to fancy dinners. Each item I touched unleashed fresh waves of grief. "Let me help you, ma'am." An airport employee knelt beside me, gently collecting scattered items. Her name tag read Gloria. She had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Are you all right?" The simple question broke something inside me. When was the last time someone had asked if I was all right? Not how soon I would get over it or what practical steps I needed to take, but simply if I was okay. "My husband died," I whispered. "I just buried him in Singapore." Gloria's expression softened with genuine compassion. She helped me repack the suitcase in silence, then personally escorted me to the rideshare pickup area. "Is someone coming for you?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, my family is busy." Her frown spoke volumes, but she did not comment. Instead, she waited with me until the rideshare arrived, helped load my luggage, and squeezed my hand before I got in. "Take care of yourself," she said. It was more comfort than my own family had offered. The rideshare cost $78 due to rush hour pricing. The driver, an older man named Paul, made polite conversation as we navigated heavy traffic. When he asked about my trip, I gave vague answers, afraid I would shatter completely if I spoke the truth aloud. He seemed to sense my distress and turned on soft music, occasionally pointing out changes to the city that had occurred in recent months. After nearly an hour, we pulled into my driveway. The house looked exactly as I had left it, yet completely different. James would never again open that front door, never again pull into this driveway, never again complain about the maple tree dropping seeds that clogged the gutters. Paul helped carry my luggage to the porch. As he set down the last bag, he hesitated. "Are you sure you're okay, miss? You seem like you might need someone." I assured him I was fine, tipped him generously, and watched his taillights disappear down the street before fumbling with my house keys. The door swung open to reveal a cold, dark interior. I had asked my mother to adjust the thermostat the day before my arrival. She had apparently forgotten. Inside, stale air greeted me. Mail overflowed from the basket by the door, another task my family had promised to handle but clearly ignored. The refrigerator contained only expired condiments and a moldy container of something unidentifiable. My brother had assured me he would stock basic necessities before my return. Too exhausted to deal with any of it, I dragged myself upstairs to our bedroom. I could not bear to sleep in our bed, so I curled up in the armchair by the window, still wearing my coat because the house was so cold. Surrounded by photographs of happier times, I finally allowed myself to break down completely. I woke hours later, disoriented and shivering. The house was silent in a way it had never been when James was alive. No footsteps in the hallway, no coffee maker gurgling downstairs, no off-key humming from the shower. Just emptiness and the occasional creak of settling wood. James's closet door stood partially open, revealing the clothes he had left behind. My family had promised to organize his belongings to make my return easier. Inside, I found everything untouched. His shoes lined up precisely as he had left them. His favorite flannel shirt still hung on the hook where he had placed it the morning he left for Singapore. Every item remained exactly where it had been 6 months ago, preserved like a museum to the life we once had. I sank to the floor of the closet, pulling his shirt into my arms, desperately searching for any lingering trace of his scent. There was nothing, just clean cotton and the faint mustiness of a space unopened for too long. I had carried pieces of him across the ocean, only to find that the pieces I had left behind no longer felt like him at all. Morning arrived with a strange gurgling sound from downstairs. Stiff from sleeping in the chair, I made my way down to investigate. The noise grew louder as I approached the kitchen. When I flipped on the light switch, I gasped in horror. Water poured from a large crack in the ceiling, cascading down the walls and pooling across the tile floor. The temperature in the house had dropped even further overnight, and I could see my breath clouding in front of my face. I splashed through 3 inches of ice-cold water to reach the utility closet where the main water shutoff valve was located. The metal wheel was so cold it burned my fingers as I struggled to turn it. After several attempts, the flow of water finally stopped, but the damage was already extensive. Water had seeped under the hardwood floors in the dining room, causing them to buckle and warp. The drywall in the kitchen sagged dangerously, and water dripped from light fixtures, creating a hazardous electrical situation. The pipe must have frozen and burst during the recent cold snap. If someone had maintained proper heating in the house as promised, this never would have happened. I stood in my waterlogged kitchen, staring at the destruction, feeling oddly detached. After everything else, this almost seemed comical. Of course my homecoming would include a flooded house. Outside, the temperature was dropping rapidly as another winter storm approached. The local news had been warning about it for days, according to notifications on my phone. My family must have known about the forecast when they suggested I drive carefully, yet no one had thought to ensure the house was properly winterized or heated. I called an emergency plumber, only to be told they were backed up for days due to similar issues across the city. "We're looking at Tuesday at the earliest," the dispatcher explained apologetically. "The storm has everyone calling in with burst pipes." My next call was to my brother. Troy answered on the 4th ring, his voice distracted. "Hey, I can't really talk right now. Getting ready for that dinner with the Wilsons I mentioned. The house is flooded. A pipe burst. There's water everywhere, and the plumber can't come until Tuesday." "That sucks," Troy replied, sounding more annoyed than concerned. "Did you try other plumbers? Maybe check Angie's list or something?" "Troy, I just got back from burying my husband. I've been traveling for more than a day straight. I can't stay here. There's water in the electrical fixtures and no heat. Could I possibly stay with you until this gets sorted out?" The silence that followed told me everything before he even spoke. "Actually, tonight is really bad timing. Lisa and I have the Wilsons coming over, clients I've been trying to land for months, and our guest room is full of Lisa's crafting supplies right now. Have you called Mom and Dad?" I ended that call and tried my parents next.
My mother answered with immediate excuses. "Oh, honey, you know we would normally say yes, but the bridge club is meeting here tomorrow and we've spent all day preparing. Plus, your father's back has been acting up. We just can't handle guests right now. What about a hotel? You should have insurance for that sort of thing." By this point, I had not eaten a proper meal in over 24 hours. The international travel, grief, and now this crisis had left me physically depleted. I felt lightheaded and nauseated as I tried to navigate through the flooded kitchen to find anything edible. The power flickered ominously as the storm outside intensified. I managed to locate a package of stale crackers in a cupboard and ate them mechanically while standing in water that had soaked through my shoes and socks. My extremities were beginning to go numb from the cold, but I could not seem to make myself care enough to find dry clothes. Everything felt distant and unimportant. In a last desperate attempt to fix something, anything, I decided to check the electrical panel in the basement to see if I could at least get some heat working in part of the house. The basement stairs were slick with water, and I gripped the railing tightly as I made my way down. The musty space was partially flooded, with water reaching my ankles. I sloshed toward the electrical panel on the far wall, using my phone flashlight to guide me.
As I reached for the panel door, my foot slipped on the wet concrete. I fell forward, my hand instinctively bracing against the metal box. A sharp jolt of electricity shot through my arm, throwing me backward. My head struck something hard as I fell, and for a moment, everything went dark. I came to on the basement floor, disoriented and shivering violently. My right arm tingled painfully from the electrical shock, and something warm trickled down the side of my face. When I touched my temple, my fingers came away red with blood. The fall had left a gash just above my eyebrow. Struggling to my feet, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. "We just saw the news," Troy stammered, his face pale. "They're making it sound like we abandon you." My mother swept in behind him, already defensive. "This is a complete misrepresentation," she told the nurse before even looking at me. "We had no idea the house was in such condition. Amelia knows we would have helped if we'd understood." My father lingered by the door, silent and unreadable. Only when the nurse left did he approach my bed, lowering his voice. "Are you going to be okay?" It was the first genuine question any of them had asked since James died. Minutes later, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Extended family, friends, even my father's boss. My Aunt Susan demanded to know why no one had gone to the airport. The family's carefully polished image of loving support was collapsing under the weight of reality. I drifted in and out of sleep, catching fragments of their hushed hallway arguments. Troy worried about his reputation, my mother about her bridge club, my father about appearances. Not once did I hear concern for me. Their focus was on damage control, not remorse. By contrast, the hospital social worker brought real comfort. She explained how the community was rallying, a grief group offering counseling, a meal service donating food, neighbors volunteering to help. "You have options," she said gently. "You don't have to go with your family if you don't want to." It was the first time anyone had framed it as a choice. James's voice echoed in my memory. "Your worth isn't defined by their ability to see it." By morning, I was stronger, but the room felt stifling with my family's constant performance. Troy scrolled his phone, firing off posts to save face. My mother fussed with my bedside table, muttering that the media had exaggerated. My father paced the window, sighing like the victim of someone else's burden. When Dr. Reynolds entered to review my condition, my mother's tone flipped instantly. She clutched my arm with false tenderness. "We're just so grateful she's all right. Of course she'll be coming home with us. Our family always sticks together." Dr. Reynolds ignored her and looked at me. "Amelia needs rest, nutrition, warmth, and minimal stress. What support system do you have in place?" Before I could answer, Troy jumped in. "She has us. There was just a misunderstanding about her arrival yesterday. The media twisted it." Dr. Reynolds' tone stayed professional. "Will someone be available with her continuously for the next 48 hours? A concussion requires monitoring. Of course, my mother replied smoothly. We've prepared the guest room. I'll rearrange everything. Just then, Nurse Jessica entered with my medication and breakfast. She had watched my family's rehearsed concern all morning. As she checked my vitals, she leaned closer. Are you comfortable with this plan, Amelia? Because there are alternatives. My mother stiffened. Alternatives? She's coming home with her family where she belongs. Jessica ignored her, holding my gaze. The choice is yours. Something inside me shifted. For the first time since James died, I realized I wasn't trapped. My needs mattered. I drew a shaky breath. I'd like to hear about the alternatives, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. The room went still. Troy stopped typing mid-text. My mother's lips parted in disbelief. My father turned away. For once, I had chosen myself. My mother's mouth opened and closed without sound. My father turned from the window with a frown. Amelia, my mother finally managed, you cannot be serious. After everything we have done, what exactly have you done? The words slipped out before I could stop them, but once spoken, I didn't want them back. When James was dying, you were too busy to visit. When I buried him alone, flights were too expensive. When I returned after 30 hours of travel, you suggested Uber. When my pipes burst, you chose Bridge Club over checking on me. My voice stayed calm, factual. So, tell me again what you have done that entitles you to control my recovery now that people are watching. Troy shot to his feet. That is completely unfair. We didn't know how serious. I didn't ask, I cut in. Not once did you ask how I was really doing. Not once did you offer help without excuses. You didn't need to see me on the news to know I was grieving. You just chose not to see it. My mother's cheeks flushed. We've always supported you, Amelia. Maybe not in the exact way you wanted, but families can't drop everything for every crisis. Your expectations are unrealistic. I tilted my head. Needing a ride from the airport after burying my husband is unrealistic? Hoping someone checked the heat in my house so I wouldn't freeze alone? That's too much? We're busy people, Troy muttered. We can't remember every little detail. Every little detail, I repeated, letting the words hang. Like whether your newly widowed sister might freeze to death in her home. My father finally spoke, his voice low. Amelia, we understand you're upset. Grief makes people say things they don't mean. When you're thinking clearly, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, I interrupted. For the first time, I see our family dynamic without excuses. I've spent my life accepting scraps of attention and calling it a feast. Jessica, quietly arranging my medication, glanced up. Her calm presence gave me strength. I don't hate you, I said softly. I don't even blame you for being who you are, but I won't pretend you can give me what I need, or that you would, even if you could. So what are you saying? My mother demanded. You'd rather stay with strangers than your own family? I'm saying I choose healing over appearances. I choose genuine support over obligation disguised as care. At that moment, the social worker, Miss Patel, entered with a folder. My family fell silent. She outlined the community resources arranged. 2 weeks at the Riverview Hotel while my house was repaired, meal deliveries, transportation, a grief support group, even neighbors volunteering to check in. The contrast was undeniable. Strangers had shown more kindness in days than my family had in years. This is ridiculous, Troy sputtered. You're choosing random people over your own blood. I looked at him, really looked at him. No, I'm choosing kindness over resentment. I'm choosing to value myself enough to accept help that comes without conditions. My mother snatched her purse. When you come to your senses, we'll be waiting. But don't expect us to drop everything again. That's exactly my point. I never could, and now I no longer will. They filed out.
My father lingered at the door as if he might say something meaningful. Instead, he only nodded once and followed them. Jessica adjusted my pillows. "That took incredible courage," she murmured. "It doesn't feel like courage, it feels like giving up." "You're not giving up," she said gently. "You're giving yourself permission to heal without carrying their baggage too. There's a difference." That afternoon, community representatives visited. The hotel manager, the restoration team, the meal service coordinator. Each conversation reinforced Jessica's words. This wasn't rejection, it was acceptance. Acceptance that family, by blood, could not always provide what we needed. And that didn't mean I was failing. By evening, I was settled into a suite overlooking the river. The bed was soft, the room warm, the fridge stocked. On the desk sat a small potted plant with a card signed by hospital staff.
For the first time since James died, I felt something besides grief. Not happiness, not yet, but a fragile seed of peace. As the sun sank over the river, I whispered to James, "I think you'd be proud of me today. I finally did what you always said I should." In the silence, I could almost hear his reply, "I've always been proud of you. It was yourself you needed to make proud." 3 months passed in a steady blur of healing. My concussion symptoms faded. The burns and scars softened into faint reminders. The house, once damaged, became a place renewed, smarter, warmer, safer. The grief support group helped me process not only James' loss, but also the truth about my family. Eleanor, the facilitator, often said, "Grief strips away pretense. It forces us to face truth, both painful and beautiful." And she was right. Neighbors I once barely knew became friends. Diane from across the street brought soup on Sundays. Robert and Thomas helped rebuild my garden beds. My home and my heart were slowly being restored. Maria, a retired teacher from down the block, often sat with me on difficult days when words were unnecessary, but presence was essential. My family maintained their distance. Occasionally, I received text messages, superficially pleasant, but void of any acknowledgement of our confrontation in the hospital. My mother sent a generic thinking of you card, signed by all 3 of them. Troy called once, ostensibly to check on me, but in reality to mention that his clients had seen the news story and he wanted to clarify misconceptions. My father sent an email with links to home insurance information, his only concession that anything significant had happened. I replied politely, but briefly to each contact, no longer expecting deeper connection or understanding. The boundary I had drawn in the hospital remained firm, not as punishment, but as protection for my fragile heart. I could not afford to waste limited emotional resources on relationships that consistently took more than they gave. 6 months after James's death, I established the James Henderson Memorial Scholarship for International Education at our alma mater. With life insurance funds finally processed, I created an endowment to support students studying abroad, this time with emergency systems in place. The scholarship included coverage for family travel and contingency funds for unexpected crises, precisely what I had lacked when my world collapsed overseas. Working on the scholarship gave me purpose in my darkest hours. Every clause reflected a lesson carved from pain. Every safeguard stood as protection for future students and their families. James had always cherished education and opportunity. This became the perfect way to honor his memory while transforming grief into meaning. On what would have been our 11th anniversary, I hosted a small gathering in my rebuilt home to announce the scholarship's first recipient. Close friends who had supported me throughout my journey joined the celebration along with new friends made along the way. My family received invitations but declined, citing prior commitments. As I presented the scholarship to Angela, a bright-eyed junior preparing to study in Japan, I felt James's presence more strongly than I had since his death, not as a ghost, but as the enduring impact of love. His influence lived on in my resilience and my ability to shape suffering into something lasting.
This scholarship exists because of great love and profound loss, but also because of an unexpected truth that family can be found in surprising places. It is not always about blood, but about who shows up when it matters most. The following week, I received a handwritten letter from my father, something I had never seen from him before. Unlike the shallow messages of past months, this one contained reflection. I have been thinking about what happened after you returned from Singapore. While your mother and brother may never see it clearly, I recognize our failure, not only in practical matters like rides and house maintenance, but in the deeper obligation to comfort you in your darkest hours. I have no excuses, only late and insufficient acknowledgement. The man you married would be proud of the woman you have become. Perhaps someday, if you are willing, we might find a way forward, not as we were, but as we could be. I did not respond immediately. The letter demanded contemplation, not reaction. My therapist, who had been guiding me through grief and family dynamics, asked, "What do you want from a relationship with your father? Not what you think you should want, but what would truly serve your well-being?" The question lingered for days. Eventually, I replied with boundaries clearly defined. I agreed to occasional lunches, just the two of us, framed as exploratory rather than obligatory. I would not be returning to family gatherings or holiday celebrations in the near future. Any relationship moving forward would rest on mutual respect and genuine connection, not performance or appearances. To my surprise, he accepted without argument. Our first lunch was awkward but civil, the second slightly easier. By the third, we found a rhythm, acknowledging our past without being defined by it. It was not the father-daughter bond others might envy, but it was authentic, in a way our relationship had never been before. My mother and brother remained distant, sending the occasional holiday card or impersonal gift, but never addressing the fracture between us. I accepted this as their choice, focusing instead on relationships that nourished me. A year after James's death, I stood at the airport once again, this time waiting for a flight back to Singapore to visit his grave on the anniversary. Around me, families embraced with joy and chatter. I felt a mix of emotions, lingering sadness for what my family could not be, but no longer the desperate longing of before. I had learned that family could be chosen, that support often came from unexpected places, that boundaries were not walls, but filters, letting the good end while keeping harm at bay. The greatest lesson from that painful homecoming was never about my family's failures. It was about humanity's capacity to step forward, to hold space for each other's pain, about the healing power of being truly seen, about the family we create when the one we are born into cannot meet our needs. If you have ever felt abandoned in your hardest moment, please know you are not alone. Your worth is not defined by others' recognition. Sometimes the people we expect the most from simply can't provide what we need, not because we lack value, but because of their limitations. The challenge is to stay open to unexpected care, even when past wounds make that openness feel dangerous. What unexpected sources of support have you discovered in difficult times? Have you been surprised by kindness from strangers when those closest to you could not be there? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated, please like, subscribe, and share to reach others who may feel alone in their struggles. Remember, your story matters, your boundaries are valid, and healing is always possible, sometimes in ways we never imagined. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.